in addition to being one of the most difficult, it is also one of the most important portfolios that exists in government. It is the most important because it deals with our most vulnerable kids. And if you need a reminder of just how vulnerable those kids are that are the subject of this portfolio, then I remind you of the tragic event that resulted in the death of a little boy in May 2021 in Port Lincoln. And I remind you of at least 6 coronial inquests since 2010 into the deaths of Chloe Valentine, Ebony Napier, Heidi Singh, Amber Rigney and Corey Mitchell, and of course Zane Chilcott. And of course, the review of 2 further deaths, Charlie Newland and Mackay Wanganeen, a report that found at the time that there were 500 kids in SA living in high-risk situations. And I remember when that report came out and the very immediate response we had from the Minister and the Premier about everything we were going to do to address that very high-risk situation that those kids were living in. Frankly, Mr President, we haven't seen much from this government, but from this Minister. And what I find most bitterly disappointing about the way that the Minister has conducted herself in this is the benefit that we have all given her to get this right. That is disappointing, and I'm sure I'm not the only one with that frustration when the Minister says, we're nearly there, we're nearly there, we're nearly there. And here we are 16 months later and we're nowhere near there. I had to search the budget paper really closely for funds that would deal with the issue of child protection. I found one paragraph in amongst the supporting communities page, which talked about $70 million that was going to be allocated in 23-24. That was $70 million going towards kids in out-of-home care in additional resources. It's not money that's going into services for kids. It's money that's going towards where 75% of the child protection budget goes, and that is keeping kids out of their homes, in residential care and out-of-home care. Now, we know there are extraordinary people who do extraordinary things. Fostering kinship carers, grand carers SA, and of course the carer project. And there are issues that divide those groups. There are absolutely issues that divide those groups. But the one thing that unites them unanimously is their shared frustration with this government in terms of its response to the needs, not just of foster carers and kinship carers, but of the kids that we're talking about, the kids that they are looking after. And all of us have come in here and stood time and time again and spoken about this issue. And we have a minister who just says, trust me, I'm getting there. Trust me, something is coming. And when we talk about the announcements, I don't think I see a week go by where I don't see an announcement by this minister. And generally speaking, there's lots of noise by this minister. Have a look at all the announcement this minister has made since budget day. I saw one on child protection, but I saw lots about sports vouchers. Fantastic. I saw lots about sports vouchers. I saw lots about sporting activities. There's racing in there. Everything else that she focuses her time on, except the state's most vulnerable kids. And that is her core work. I know this government loves this affinity for sporting activities, and it's popular. People love sports. That's great. But you've got the wrong minister doing both jobs. You've got the wrong minister doing both jobs because her core focus seems to be on what's populist. Her core focus is on all the stuff that riding scooters down North Terrace. I'd like to see her meeting with carers on the steps of Parliament House as opposed to riding scooters down there and telling us what she's going to do about that. I'd just like a response from her that we have waited for as long as other members have indicated, 16 months. And that is utterly unacceptable. There was a letter set 16th of March. I don't need to remind anyone what that date was. 16th of March 2022. Katrine Hildyard MP, member for Raynell. And I'm going to quote the letter. It was sent to the Chief Executive Officer of Connecting Foster and Kinship Carers SA. Dear Fiona, thank you very much for what your organisation does to ensure South Australia's most vulnerable children are protected and enabled to thrive. Every South Australian child being loved, safe and healthy matters to Labor and to the South Australian community. A child's starting point should never limit their future. Labor understands that collaborative, concerted effort across government and the community is needed to ensure the safety, health and well-being of South Australian children. Our Malinauskas Labor government will focus on improving the lives of South Australian children by putting the welfare of children at the centre of our decision-making and actions. In doing so, Labor is prepared to tackle some of the most difficult and complex social issues impacting children and their families in partnership with children, their families and their communities. Our actions on child protection will include giving children a voice. Labor will improve advocacy and support for children and young people in care and leaving care. If the child protection system is going to do the job the community expects of it, it must be open for scrutiny, and the people most involved, the children and the carers, must be able to speak up. Oh, they're speaking up all right. They're speaking up all right. They're speaking up about all the things in this letter that the government and the minister, who has made these pledges herself, hasn't done. Our Malinauskas Labor government will, and then we've got, invest in the Create Foundation to work with children and young people in care to identity and develop future housing work and study pathways, and that goes on. Ensure the Guardian for Children and Young People is funded to be the community visitor for children in residential care. Empower the Aboriginal Children's Commissioner to create an Aboriginal-led group in conjunction with Aboriginal children, families and organisations that will ensure Aboriginal voices are heard and acted upon, and so on. Work with the Create Foundation and the Guardianship for Children and Young People to establish a mechanism for the Minister to hear directly from children in care on at least quarterly basis. Addressing the child protection workforce crisis, it is essential that child protection workforce is better supported. The crisis in child protection has been felt deeply by workers in residential care and across the department. Our Malinauskas government will fill existing job vacancies, develop a workforce plan in consultation with workers and their unions and community organisations to ensure sustainable, safe staffing levels of the future. Initiate a campaign to connect students and other job seekers with workers in child protection. Ensure at least quarterly meetings between the Minister and the relevant unions to hear about staffing issues that need to be addressed. And lastly, Labor will also review legislative and policy settings so that responsibility for children's safety and well-being is taken, and so that policies and practices work effectively for children, their families, carers, workers and communities. I betcha the only thing that the Minister is taking out of this speech is this. I betcha right now someone in her office, at her request, is sitting there going, oh crap, which one have we done? 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 I'll tell you which one you haven't done. You haven't done the most important one. You haven't done the one that you pledged you were going to do and the one that everybody else has been waiting for 16 months. That's the report that's sitting on your desk collecting dust. And that's the bitter disappointment that you've brought to this parliament, because you have come to all of us time and time again, and I've had these conversations with you, Minister, in my office, in your office, before Budget and Finance, any other committee we can call. And we have been told time and time and time again, it's coming, it's coming. Just be patient. Do you know what's happening while we're being patient? More and more kids are being put at risk. And if you honestly expect anyone in this circle to believe that you're putting these kids at the centre of your policy making, then you need to look no further than your budget that was released last week, because they're not front and centre of this budget. They're by no means front and centre of this budget. Foster and kinship carers have been telling this government for I don't know how long what they need. We've had reference to the Dr. Rani report. I've spoken last February this year, I spoke about that, about the superannuation, about how much carers save governments in money. This could be done just purely on an economic basis. If someone sat there, maybe if the Treasurer sat there and did the sums, he'd realise that spending 75% of the child protection budget on out-of-home care is nowhere near as effective or economic as ensuring that those kids are appropriately placed in housing with loved ones, with kinship, with carers, with grandcarers, who are appropriately recompensed. You're never going to make up for the fact that those kids aren't with their parents, but for whatever reason, they can't be. But don't treat the people who are looking after them like mugs. And that's what we do. We treat them like mugs. We bank on the fact that in 85% of cases, some family member, whether they can afford it or not, whether they're in their retirement or not, whether they have to give up their job or not, whether they're and overwhelmingly it's women, they're going to have to give up going to work, sell their house, do whatever they have to do. This government banks on the fact that in 85% of cases, a family member is going to put their hand up and they're going to look after that kid. They have had crickets. It is not just disrespect that we've shown those families who do what they do. It is utterly unconscionable. Utterly and totally unconscionable. So when the minister next comes and says, give me a little bit more time, let's hear, these are all the great things that are coming, it's not going to wash anymore, Mr. President. We've been there, we've done that. I've been having those discussions with her all year, not just this year, mind you, and we're all still waiting. Mr. President, I know that the minister will also say, you know I'm trying. You know I'm trying really hard. I'm trying really hard. I know that this is our priority. I know that this is our priority. And there's only 25% left of our budget that I can contribute towards the things that are actually going to make a meaningful impact and change the trajectory of these kids' lives. But in the meantime, we're going to keep funding the 75% of that funding is going to go towards residential care. 75% of the budget, residential care. That in itself is an extraordinary figure. But then the minister will say, I have to compete. I have to compete against all those other ministers and all those other interests and everyone else who wants money from the budget for their projects and their portfolios. I have to compete, and I'm worried about what I'm going to get. I've never heard a bigger crock than that one. I've never heard more rubbish than that. That flies in the face of every commitment that she gave on the 16th of March 2022 on behalf of this government. We have had a child protection crisis in this state for a very long time. And when this minister was in opposition, she had a red-hot crack at the then minister about the way she conducted this. And when we had that legislation introduced into this place, sure, we weren't happy with it either. We weren't happy with the former minister's proposals around this. But you really have to think we're stupid, like really, really stupid, or you're really, really smart, that after all this time, since the former minister left, something like 2019, and we're now in 2024, we're still waiting. We're still waiting to see that same piece of legislation. Either those bureaucrats are moving really bloody slowly, or this minister is taking the mickey out of all of us. And worst of all, she's turning her back on the most vulnerable kids in the state. The most vulnerable kids in the state. And their carers. And their grandcarers. Whoever it is who's looking after these kids. And if you think for a minute that putting kids in under the care of guardianship is the answer, you are so sorely mistaken.